My name is Carolina Flores, and I work very closely with the Santa Fe Public Schools, especially Capital, so I'm very familiar here in Santa Fe. I grew up here. And, well, like almost all of the things that were covered here, we covered on our table, from water, energy, corporate America, economic fairness and all that. But I don't want to just go through a list. I actually want to give you some practical solutions. What I think are practical anyways, but end the war and use that money for education, to fund education, pay our teachers better, have more resources. Support the DREAM Act to help those students to become productive citizens and give back to their community what they have gained in our schools. Let's see, what else do I have? Better living wages. So those, I want to focus on education because that seems to be a theme that ran through, all over the place. And I just want to give you a statistic. 85% of the crimes committed in the United States are committed by people who drop out of high school. So that tells you a lot about the problems and the disparities and the social injustices that we have. Here in New Mexico, we have about a 50 to 60% dropout rate. It's something very alarming, and I've seen it firsthand. And I think that education is one of the most important things if you want to help a community, is getting them access to education. Like some of my fellow people said before, is to make college more accessible, more affordable. Like we already have the lottery scholarship, it's a great thing, and I hope it never goes away, because that's how I got through college. So I just really want you to think also about our immigrant community and our Native American students, our African American students, our minority groups who are suffering, and we're seeing the oppression and the effects of it now. And I think that a really good way to turn all that around is to give them the opportunity to be educated, to give them the opportunity to become those lawyers, those nurses, those teachers that we need here in New Mexico. So keep that in mind, and thank you.
My name is Jennifer Salazar. I'm from Santa Fe. My table talked about probably four main issues. We talked about sustainability, we talked about immigration, we talked about education, and substance abuse. And the things that I brought up personally were education, because I was recently talking to a Santa Fe high school student who, she was supposed to be a freshman, but she got kicked out of Santa Fe High, and she wasn't going to school, she wasn't working, she wasn't doing anything. And I know a couple of people in that same situation, and I have younger brothers and sisters that are in the high school level, and I don't want to see that happen for them. And so I think there needs to be real attention addressed to education, especially high school education and junior high in Santa Fe, Rio Viva, Albuquerque, all these different communities. And I think I suggested maybe alternative schools, or also different classrooms where kids who have trouble, who have maybe learning differences or need special help can get that help, instead of just, end up having to drop out because they're getting in trouble, because they're bored, because all of these different reasons. So there need to be different avenues for them to go down. We also talked about substance abuse and how that's really affected people, especially in Rio Viva County, and there's been a lot of attention on meth use, and we talked about the importance of prevention, and I think someone else up here, Alma, I believe, talked about the importance of prevention as a solution, and not just thinking about how to deal with it after it's already happened. We really need to address the issue of substance abuse in our families and our communities, because it affects everyone. And personally, I have family in Rio Arriba County, and my family has been touched by drug abuse, and it's very difficult. It's something that we struggle with every day. So we also talked about sustainability and providing responsible avenues for economic growth while also being friendly to the environment. And we talked about meeting people's basic needs: food, water, shelter, clothing, but also, thinking about the environment in terms of all of that, in terms of growth, in terms of affordable housing and jobs, and what that impact has on the environment, and how those two can work together instead of opposite of each other. We also talked about politicians needing to think in the long term, and especially when economic opportunities arise in New Mexico, not just jumping on the first thing, but really analyzing the economic impact, the environmental impact for the future, for children, for grandchildren, and just making responsible decisions. So those are our things.
Thank you. That's okay. So we talked a lot about democracy, and I wanted to start with a section from the state constitution. It says all political power is vested in and derived from the people. All government of right originates with the people, is founded upon their will, and is instituted solely for their good. Now, some of you are running for the state legislature. If you go down to the state legislature by yourself, and you walk in and someone says, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" and you say, "I'm a citizen," you guarantee to get a sarcastic laugh, because we have no power at the state legislature as citizens. We have no power in our own county. When Tecton Energy comes in to drill for oil and gas, all the county commissioners can say is, "We can't stop them from drilling for oil and gas. All we can do is regulate them." Bruce Rome's running for the Public Regulation Commission. All he can do is regulate the horrors of the coal-fired power plants that are destroying the environment. When we talk about these other things that were so well said, by the way, by everyone else, it all boils down to a question of who decides. And what I hope to live in 10 years, I hope to live in a state that is truly democratic, that has established the right of people over the rights of corporations, that is living on 70% of locally grown food, not only 3 like we have now, that has established water as a human right, and that has a living, breathing democracy, and that is actually a state where people look to instead of, the lower rung, where it's actually a democracy. And I know that you guys are running, I know you're running for the right reasons, and I know what you heard here tonight was simply the expression of the will of the people. And to my mind and heart, it was so beautifully stated. And if we can begin to turn toward democracy, then we can have in our school. Why don't we teach the Constitution in our schools? Why don't we teach the history of this country? Why don't we teach how we went from a slave state to a corporate state, and how we can actually institute democracy? Then we can have local farming, local energy, local education that doesn't create dropouts, and we can actually begin to laterally connect with our own neighbors, our own communities, our own counties, and actually begin to connect with the states and the nations around us. So that's it. You've been great listeners. Thank you.